The second-born female illegally registered to my parents at birth, that was pretending to be my second oldest sister when I was born the 18th of January, 1972. The eventual circumstances turned out to have more of the coincidental type, as a flow-on effect, following the crime of baby theft off my father Kevin Webb the Habsburg. My father Kevin Webb became a Habsburg Duke and Lord of Austria and Hungary in 1984. The second illegally registered child was born October 1961. Her biological father was a Reewoldt, a part North American, probably named Rowdy. That Reewoldt family were related to part Greek impostors who were executed for pretending to be the Romanov royal family in public in 1917, after the real Romanovs were abducted and murdered in 1916. My mother Judith, my father Kevin's real wife, was a legitimate Romanov who was ineligible to be royalty of Russia. She was the legitimate daughter of Tsarina Alexandra Fyodorova the Romanov's firstborn child, Ioseb Jugashvili, also known by his nickname Stalin. He was ineligible to be Romanov royalty of Russia, was the general secretary of the Communist Party, and the political head of state of the Soviet Union, ending in 1953. He was my grandfather, and died in 1979. I am the only living legitimate Romanov family member in the world, since the death of my estranged mother Judith in 2018. Pauline, the impostor wife of my father Kevin Webb the Habsburg, got pregnant to Rowdy Reewoldt's sperm in around January. It was an obvious attempt at further terrorism, stalking and teasing of my grandfather Ioseb, also known as Stalin. My father Kevin's real wife, Ioseb's daughter, dumped the baby or babies he was the father of at birth, around the same time the second impostor child was born, the Reewoldt. I would like to point out that my mother Judith was adopted by a Gippsland couple when she was a child, around the age of 3. She was not using the surname Jugashvili when she married my father Kevin Webb. It was likely motivated by the idea of depriving my grandfather Ioseb of a legitimate, part Romanov, grandchild, on top of depriving my father of an eligible Habsburg royal child. The flow-on effects. The new illegally registered female was the granddaughter of a man called Joe Reewoldt. Joe ran the prisoner of war jail that my great-grandfather Kaiser Adolf Hitler the Hohenzollern was held prisoner of war in between December 1943 and late 1959 in Yugoslavia. She was 10 when I was born and looked a lot like her grandfather Joe. Joe was a former army general in the USA who was dishonorably discharged for a mass murder of Native Americans. He moved to Yugoslavia afterwards. Yugoslavia was partially set up as a bloc nation by the USA and other North Americans. Joe ran the jail Kaiser Adolf Hitler the Hohenzollern was held prisoner in for nearly 16 years. Kaiser Adolf escaped when Joe forced him to play Russian gun roulette with him at gunpoint in late 1959 and lost. Joe shot himself through the head on his first turn, the second turn overall. Joe had a full set of prison governor keys on his uniform when he shot himself, which were within reach of Kaiser Adolf through the bars of his cell. Kaiser Adolf used them to escape jail. Heinously evil lunatic Albert Einstein's sister, Sadie Einstein, was away visiting her daughter she had before World War II that day. Sadie was living part-time in an apartment outside the cell Kaiser Adolf Hitler was held prisoner in since December 1943. Joe's son Rowdy Reewoldt, a trainee prison guard, was at a Yugoslavian national service camp. Heinously evil idiot Sadie was involved in a failed attempt to breed a deliberately inbred baby using Kaiser Adolf Hitler's stolen sperm whilst he was a prisoner in the jail in 1944. Her and her brother Albert were both biological cousins of Adolf. She self-aborted the child in front of Kaiser Adolf, just out of reach of him on the other side of the bars outside his cell, in April 1944, when it was around 3 months gestated. Joe had left her alone with Kaiser Adolf Hitler as if it was forced engagement time in preparation for when the child was born in around November 1944. Sadie tried to make him yell and scream and beg her to stop, as if he thought the child was his only chance for an heir and successor. She sat at the dinner table in a small part of a spinster's apartment she lived in outside his cell, just out of reach of him through the bars. She self-aborted the baby with a knitting needle, then placed the aborted fetus on a different table with a raised circular feature on it. She went and cleaned herself up. When Joe returned, she lied and said it was an incidental miscarriage and there was nothing she could do. Film cameras were installed afterwards and used as security cameras to avoid any further arguments between the staff. From then on, they filmed the monarch of Germany every day in his makeshift prison cell in an underground subway train station that was never used for public transport. Joe turned those film cameras on in late 1959 when he arrived at work, very drunk, after committing a mass murder. He shot everyone in the jail except the prisoner. Then forced my great-grandfather to play Russian gun roulette with him at gunpoint and shot himself through the head on his first turn. He was the grandfather of the second oldest female pretending to be one of my older sisters when I was growing up. She was born in October 1961, via the impostor wife Pauline, and illegally registered to my parents at birth. Her birth was less than 2 years after her grandfather Joe shot himself at the jail in Yugoslavia. She was born after my father Kevin's grandfather Prince Sebastian Habsburg died in 1960. The Habsburg royal family estate was illegally withheld from my Webb family after his death, just before she was born. It still is. When I was born the 18th of January, 1972, she was in my family household, pretending to be my father Kevin's daughter. Her grandfather Joe had regularly assaulted and tortured my great-grandfather Kaiser Adolf Hitler the Hohenzollern when he was illegally held prisoner between December 1943 and late 1959. The motives for being there were further stalking and abuse of my Romanov and Habsburg families.